marriage in heaven. Now, I don't like to do these little, I'm not going to do one of those little polls where who thinks it is and who thinks not, because sometimes people think they'll come to a wrong conclusion, they'll raise their hand, and I don't want to embarrass anybody, but we talked about this, the account of this is found in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John does not have the account of Jesus being questioned by the Sadducees in regards to his marriage in heaven. And one of the things they were hoping to do, we got to remember, the reason that they were asking this question is not because they really had any interest in marriage, not because they had any interest in the idea about really getting an understanding about who this woman's husband would be, who had been married several times, and then when she dies, their whole point of questioning Jesus was to poke holes in the idea of the resurrection, because we know that the Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection. That party was not a believer in really almost anything supernatural. It's very interesting. They believed in God, who is a supernatural God. God is supernatural. He had to take human form. He is not human form. He does not. I don't want to say he doesn't exist in the physical plane, because God exists. But the idea that he is not in human form, he had to take human form so that he could accomplish his will here on this earth. He did that through his Son, Jesus Christ. But they believed in a God, but they believed that that's where the end of it is. They believed that he created the world, he caused it to come into existence, and then he allowed us to go about our lives and to do what we were going to do, and that when we die, we died. There was no resurrection. We did not come back from the dead. We did not, and that includes anyone that, say, for example, that was raised from the dead. They did not believe that account. They believed that once you're dead, you're dead. Like the old saying, if you're dead like Rover. You're dead all over. Okay? You don't come back. And their whole goal was to poke holes in Jesus' preaching of the resurrection, because, he preached the resurrection, right? What did he say? What did he say about the resurrection? He was the resurrection. It was everyone that had ever been raised from the dead. This goes back into the old accounts, even the Old Testament accounts. Everybody that he raised from the dead was eventually going to die again, right? All right. So he was talking about the idea of being resurrected to eternal life. And they're trying to poke holes in that. So he goes on, and I love how he answers them in a way that not only answers their question, so to speak, but also is sort of we call it an insult. That was not Jesus' his mode of operation. That wasn't his method of operations. But it was certainly the idea that he wanted to make it very clear to them that there certainly was a resurrection. Not only that there were angelic beings, because they didn't believe in either one of those things. Okay, so he goes on. He says in chapter 22, we'll go through Matthew chapter 22, and we talked about this last week, so we're not going to rehash everything. But he says, but Jesus answered them and said, "You are wrong, because you know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God." So I like how he says this. You don't believe in a resurrection. What is beyond the power of God? Okay, he even asked that question. He said, "Is it easier to forgive sins or to heal the sick?" So I'm going to do both. I'm going to not only heal this man's sins, but I'm going to tell him don't sin anymore. All right, the idea of if you have the power to heal the sick, you certainly have the power to forgive sin. If you have the power to forgive sin, you certainly have the power to forgive the sick or heal the sick. All right, he says, "They know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection," so here he says very specifically that guess what? There is a resurrection. In the resurrection, that's a foregone conclusion that there will be a resurrection. In the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like what? Angels. This is a very misunderstood phrase, the idea of they are like angels. This has given rise to the idea that when we die, we become angels, that we are angels in heaven. Well, my blessed mother, she dies, I know where she is now. She's an angel in heaven. No, not even close. I'll be honest with you. I'm just going to tell you right now, and if people knew the truth, they would not want to be an angel. They would not want to be an angel. When we die and we're resurrected and when we go to live with Christ for eternity, we are going to be above the angels. We're not going to be angels. Okay? We don't want to be angels. We want to occupy a very special place. The angels are not sons of God, are they? We are sons and daughters of God. That's what I want to be. God is my Father. All right? Angels are created beings. They fulfill a purpose. They're there for a purpose. They accomplish that purpose, but they do not have a Redeemer. They do not have salvation. They either live with God or they do not live with God because of disobedience. There's nothing to be done for them if they are found in sin. There's nothing to be done for them. They don't have a Redeemer. Okay? So this concept that when we die we become angels is not true. And I think people they think of the idea of angels and they have that impression of what they are, and they think that this would be the preferable thing to be. All right, that is not the case. When we die, we do not. Well, for one thing, when we die, we don't go to heaven yet anyway. When we die, we await the resurrection, and when we are resurrected, we occupy a place that's greater than the angels will ever occupy. Okay. So anyway, I just wanted to say that real quick, mainly for people who may be watching on YouTube, because there are a lot of people who very misunderstand this a great deal. But it says, in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. In Luke chapter 20, 34 through 36, he says, the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy to attain to that age and to the resurrection of the dead, from the dead, neither marry nor are given in marriage, for they cannot die anymore, because they are equal to angels and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. The idea of being equal to angels, that means that's where we're going to live where they live now. Not means that we're the same. Okay? The idea of being the same as angels, no. We're equal to them in the fact that now we occupy the same position they occupy. We will be in the throne room of God. And they are sons of God. Angels are not sons of God. Being sons of the resurrection. Okay, so the idea then is, what are we to make of all this? Well, for one thing, we know that Jesus answers their question. All right? He answers it assuredly. They neither marry nor are given in marriage. So it really kind of gives a kind of a concrete understanding about what our situation is when we die. If we are married and when we die, when we go to heaven, we don't marry there. We're not given in marriage there. We're not, that relationship doesn't. It's not there, and there's a reason for this. There's a reason for this we're going to get into in a couple of minutes. Let's look at this in the concept of their question, how they asked this question. In Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 5 through 10, and I'll read it because I already have it here. It says, this is the law concerning levirate marriage. All right, if brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the dead man shall not be married outside of the family to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her as his wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And the first son whom she bears shall succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. So the whole point behind this was to continue on a lineage. The reason that lineage needed to continue on is because the land, all of the land of Canaan had been given to them as an inheritance. It was their property, and that property must continually go down the line. And he made very clear preparations for this. If someone's land had been sold in order to satisfy a debt, that land must be given back to them in the year of Jubilee. All lands revert back to their previous owners. One of the biggest problems that had happened in the time, from the time of the return of the Israelites from exile up to the time of Christ, was that all of these laws that governed the behavior of people that had positions of authority had been abused and abused and abused. The idea of rich men swallowing up widows' livelihoods, taking their properties and taking their land, that was not to be done. God was he was furious. I mean, it was just, he was wrathful over this. He loves those, he loves everyone, and he had a special place in his heart for widows and orphans. Or what does he say about widows and orphans? What is pure and undefiled religion? To visit the widows and orphans, to take care of the widows and orphans in their present condition. Okay, so we know that God loves people, and he especially has a soft spot in his heart for those who are without, who are marginalized, those who have little and have no opportunity to get any greater. So he says, I'm going to take care of these folks. And when you don't take care of these folks, beware. My wrath will be poured out on you. And he does. Okay? So he continues on. And if the man does not wish to take his brother's wife, there's a consequence for this, right? Then his brother's wife, the widow, shall go up to the gate to the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to perpetuate his brother's name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of a husband's brother to me. Well, listen. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak to him, and if he persists, they're going to try to talk some sense into this man. If he persists, saying, I do not wish to take her, then his brother's wife shall go up to him in the presence of the elders and pull his sandal off his foot and spit in his face. And she shall answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who does not build up his brother's house. And the name of his house shall be called in Israel, in the house of, and his name, okay, I'm going to drop back again. I'm trying to get this right. And the name of his house shall be called in Israel, the house of him who has his sandal pulled off. From that point on, that man, he has this infamy that's going to hang over his head because he would not perform the duty of his brother to his brother's widow. God took it very seriously. That land is perpetually his brother's. It must continually be done. All right. So there's a reason behind all this. This is the point behind the question that they pose. She was married to one man, didn't have any kids, didn't have any sons, married to the next man, next brother, married to the next brother, and it continues to go on down the line. And then they're going to ask the question, in the resurrection, whose wife will she be? Now they're trying to pull the wool over his eyes. And of course, you're talking to the Word made flesh. You're not going to pull the wool over his eyes. He knows exactly what they're trying to get at. And he answers their question. In the resurrection, marriage doesn't exist, but there's a reason behind it. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. I guess what really boils down to the question is, how can something, if there is no marriage in heaven, how can that be so? Something that is so important, especially in this culture. I mean, marriage it's overwhelmingly marriage-minded culture. How could something that's so important in this culture not be considered as important in the life to come? Right? Procreation. Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Right. Even though heaven is essentially, with the power of God, heaven is infinite. Heaven can be as, and we're thinking of a physical place, and I know that's, in human standpoint, we're thinking of a physical place. When we look at this building, we can get so many people into this building and no more. See, heaven's not like that. But then again, heaven's not a physical place, it's a spiritual place. But you're right. There's 2 points of marriage, right? There's 2 components of marriage that make it important to society. One is the idea of procreation. Okay. Now we've got to remember, in today's society, marriage is not necessary for procreation. Right? That's unfortunately, the world has cheapened the idea of procreation down so that marriage is not really necessary anymore for procreation. However, we're not talking about today's society, are we? We're talking about society of the Israelites, the Jews at this time. And for the Jewish population who was listening to this, marriage is essential. The idea of marriage not being at the heart of procreation is, under the law, sinful. That's where it's supposed to be. That's where it's supposed to remain. Okay. So the idea that procreation is an important part of the idea of the marriage relationship, the people that Jesus is talking to now. The other one is companionship, right? Procreation and companionship. Really, if outside of those 2 things, there may be a financial aspect of it if you're looking at it from a very jaundiced eye. It's like, well, we got married because we wanted to take care of one another. And I understand. I'm not taking anything away from that. I'm not casting any aspersions on that idea. But really, if you think of marriage in the traditional sense, procreation and companionship, those are the 2 main components of the marriage relationship. What's that? Right. That's right. But what did God say? He says, it's not good that man should be alone. Okay? Now, we talk about, he's looking at the being that he just created, that he just breathed the breath of life into, and he looks at it and he says, not good. Now, that's not something, a conclusion he just all of a sudden came to. Oh, I didn't think about that. He knew that from the very beginning, that if he made man, he would make a companion for it. Okay? So he says, it's not good that man should be alone, so I'm going to make a helpmate for him. All right? So he creates Eve, in the story of how he created Eve. But the whole point was, he created, for one thing, companion for his creation. Here's Adam. He needs someone to share his life with, to share all of the ups and downs, to support one another, emotional support, everything like that. And then what does he tell him to do? He says, I want you to go and what? Multiply. Fill up the earth. Subdue the earth. This is what I want you to do. I want you to make lots of little images of yourself. That's what I want you to do. So we got two components of marriage. So then we think about this for just a couple of moments. First thing, you're right. Let's see, we'll look at this. We got, how does it do this? Man. All right, we got procreation, and we've got companionship. All right, these are the two components. Most important one's the most essential, right? The most unique. Okay, you can get financial support anywhere, but this idea is what we're talking about. All right, so we know that why would something that is so important that God designed as it's the first of the divine institution? He created the family before anything else. He created the marriage relationship before anything else. Why would these not be important in heaven? Well, for one thing, we know that procreation is no longer necessary, right? We're no longer physical beings. Okay, so all that's left after the resurrection, there will be no more procreation. All right, so we know that this aspect of it is no longer needed. All right. So then we've got companionship, and you know what? I'll even put in this. It's not even just that. It's intimacy. Yeah, intimacy. All right. So now we think about. Okay. Let's think about this for just a couple of moments. All right. We've got intimacy and we've got companionship. All right. Now let's think about this in terms of the hereafter, the life that's going to come after this one. What kind of companionship and intimacy do we have up in heaven as opposed to here? Okay. What kind of companionship and intimacy do we have in heaven versus here? I want you to think about our relationship with one another. What's our relationship like here? Now, I'm not talking about just between married folks. I'm talking about between people, individuals, members of the church. Okay. And is intimacy and companionship important here? Is it essential here? Yeah, fellowship here. So let's think about this. When we are, and here we have these crude physical bodies. When these crude physical bodies are finally taken away and we are in our true form, and we are in this place known as heaven with God, will intimacy be greater or lesser than it is here? Greater. Why is that? Think about that for just a second. Why will intimacy be better up there than it is here? We will all be, for one thing, we will be perfected. All of the things that interrupt intimacy, and when I say intimacy, I'm not just talking about between husband and wife type of intimacy. I'm talking about a serious, close relationship. Think about all of the things that there are roadblocks to our intimacy here. Think about all of the things that go on in our lives that keep us from being truly intimate with one another. You know, whether it's a cultural thing, or whether it's inability to express ourselves, or whether it's maybe a problem that we have with one another that's just it's kind of a roadblock, and we haven't quite been able to get over that roadblock, whatever that is. When our lives are here or over, and all of this crudity, this earthly tabernacle is stripped away, and we achieve our true form, we will be perfected. So all of the things that inhibit our relationships here will no longer be in place. Our intimacy in heaven will transcend anything that we can understand here. And I think this is what so many people have a problem with. I know even members of the church who think about the idea, I don't know if I want to go. I don't even know if I want to go if I can't be married to my spouse. If I'm not going to be married to my spouse there, I don't know if I really want to go. And I don't know how to express it in any greater terms. That look, if you think your relationship with your spouse was good here, if you think you had a great relationship with your spouse here, you are in for something that is just jaw-dropping. You're in for something that is mind-bogglingly great when all of this is done and our form is truly achieved and we live in heaven with God as brothers and sisters with Christ, gathered around the throne, praising. And I think we just have a hard time understanding, well, what is it going to be like? And I'm not going to get into the idea about what heaven is going to be like. I can't describe it. I don't know. But I know it's going to be great because God says it's going to be great. It's going to be better because God says it's going to be better. So I have to take it for granted that when we, and look how he couches this. He says, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. That's telling me, he's saying, if heaven is better, that's what he's saying. He says, marriage is good, but it's not as good as it's going to be. That's what that verse is telling me. If you look at it, if you read the subtext beyond that verse, it's not simply we're going to have a different form so we can't be married. It's saying marriage, while it's great here, and it's good to be married, it's good to have a physical relationship with your spouse and all of the great things that go along with it, what we're going to have is going to be better than that. Don't cling to this when so much greater is going to be available to us and offered to us. And it's going to be, and we take full advantage of it. And this is the great thing. If you're not married here, what about folks who are not married here? What about them? Like, you don't have to worry about it. Our relationship is going to be that magnificent there. You won't miss marriage here because you're going to have something better there. You'll never wish you were married. What I've got now is better. Okay, that's the important thing. Is what he's looking at is what's coming at another time. All right. So we got to remember this. It's not everything that we find in this life necessarily extends to the life that's going to be coming. Right. And I'm not trying to diminish it at all, but the idea that there's going to be a point where something that is superior, everything that we find in heaven is superior to what we find here on earth. Our relationships, our closeness to God, everything that we have is going to be superior there. So we don't need to worry about that. But the question, that's what the question we get. Are we going to be married? What's it going to be like? Well, Jesus himself tells us that we won't be married. But we'll have it'll be better than it is here. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's asking for something I don't think you're in for. Let's look at this. I want Revelation chapter 19. Revelation 19, verses 6 through 9. Now, there's a reason, though, the idea of marriage is an important one. And it does not mean that marriage does not exist in heaven. There is a marriage in heaven, but it's a different kind of marriage. It's a very special type of marriage. Yeah. Marriage, Revelation 19, 6 through 9 gives us this idea of marriage. Now, here's before we read that, remember we talked about the idea of the type and antitype. I think I mentioned this last week, but I was going to get into it this week. The idea of, in the Old Testament, there were types, and in the New Testament, there were the antitypes. Noah and the ark were a type, and baptism is the antitype. The serpent on the brass serpent on the pole in the wilderness, that was a type. Jesus on the cross was the antitype. And it just goes back and forth. The earthly tabernacle was a type. The Lord's church today is the antitype. It's just going back and forth. Okay, all of these things were types and antitypes. Not everything was one, but there were a great many of them that we find. And what's the idea of the type? The type is what? We got a word for it. It is a shadow. The antitype is the actual, or the realized. All right. So Noah's going through the water in the ark was a type that was a shadow of something that was to come. God was scourging the earth; He was cleaning it of its sin, and that's why the idea of baptism doth also now save us. Not the removal of the filth of the flesh, as God did in the days of Noah. That's what He did, to remove the filth of the flesh. Mankind, the idea of flesh is not just skin, is the idea of mankind on the earth. So He washed mankind off of the earth, yet He saved Noah and his family through the ark. That was a type. The baptism now is the antitype. So now I want you to think about this for just a couple moments. The type that we have today, and many people will say that there are no modern types. I believe that there are, because it gives us the antitype in Revelation chapter 19. The type is our physical marriage. All right. Revelation chapter 19, verses 6 through 9. And I heard, as it were, the voice of a great multitude, as the sound of many waters, and as the sound of mighty thundering, saying, Alleluia! For the Lord God omnipotent reigns. Let us be glad and rejoice and give Him glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come. All right? So then we have to ask ourselves, who is the Lamb? Well, who's always been the Lamb? Jesus Christ. Absolutely. You see lamb, especially a lamb with an uppercase L, you pretty much know you're talking about Jesus Christ. All right, he continues on. For the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife has made herself ready. And to her it was granted to be arrayed in fine linen, clean and bright, for the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saint. Then he said to me, Write, Blessed are those who are called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, These are the true sayings of God. So then, we have the bridegroom, right? The bridegroom has to have a bride, right? The way it works, the way marriage works. You don't have a groom and a groom. You don't have a bride and a bride. You got a bridegroom and a bride. So if we know that the Lamb is Jesus Christ as the bridegroom, then who is the bride? Absolutely, the church. Look how it says she was arrayed in what? She was arrayed in fine linen, clean and bright, for the fine linen is what? The good works or the righteous acts of the saints. So I like that. How do we clothe ourselves? We clothe ourselves in righteousness. What is that? What we do, right? How we behave. It's not just simply an act that we do, it's how we behave, how we portray ourselves, how we show God to the world. Because the world doesn't know God. The world sees God through us. Or at least they should. It doesn't always work that way, unfortunately, but that is the way that it's supposed to work. We clothe ourselves in righteous acts, in our worship, in our benevolence, in our evangelism, and all of those things that we do, we array ourselves. So the bride is the church. Okay? So we have a type and we have an antitype. So that tells me this. If the type, remember the types were always what? Imperfect. The type is always imperfect. It's never perfect. The antitype is perfect. Okay? So Noah's Ark, it wasn't perfect, was it? But baptism is. Okay? Because what happened? After the flood washed the evil off the earth and mankind came back, what happened? Did it stay clean? Absolutely not. Mankind brought itself back, stayed hewed to God for a period of time, and then fell away again. Okay? So we know that the antitype wasn't perfect in that aspect. That brass serpent on the pole. What happened to that brass serpent eventually? It tarnished. The wood pole broke away. It was no longer necessary. Well, Christ's death on the cross is always necessary. It always will be necessary. If it weren't necessary, if it wasn't there, we would have nothing. There would be nothing for us. Okay? All right? So we have this physical marriage. Is physical marriage perfect? If you're married, you know it's not perfect. We may love each other, but sometimes we drive each other nuts. Sometimes we are unkind to one another. Sometimes we are, understand what I mean? Sometimes we're abusive towards one another. Marriage is not perfect. Physical marriage is not perfect. It takes constant work to make it work. That's just the way that it is. You got two people that are, for all intents and purposes, dissimilar, and you're bringing them together to make a life with one another. It's not perfect. Can it be very, very, very good? Yeah, that's what we're shooting for. But at the end of the day, the marriage, the physical marriage, is a shadow. It's a significant word I'm looking for. Signifier. Let's use that. It's a signifier of something that's better that's to come. The marriage between the Lamb and his bride, the church. Okay? So that tells me that while what we have on this earth is great, the marriage that we're going to have there is going to be better, way better, because we're going to be perfected. There will be nothing separating us. There will never be betrayal. There will never be lying. There will never be anything that sometimes, unfortunately, occurs in the marriage that we have here on this earth. It's a great thing. So when people say, "Well, I just believe that we're going to be," I think that we're going to be married, and we're not. What we have is going to be much better. That's what we need to be looking forward to. Don't be so tied to the things of this earth that you're not willing to let them go. We're going to have to be willing to let those things go. All right. Any questions so far? All right. Trying to think of what else I wanted to do. I don't want to gild the lily, so I don't want to just go in necessarily say stuff that's not necessary. Anybody that want to add anything to it? You don't have a choice, do you? No. We have to be, and that's part of the human condition, is understanding that we are vapor. Our lives are short, and they can be short and painful. They can be short and very good. What's worse is having a long, miserable life. Whatever it is, we do have to be willing to not be so bound to the things of this earth that we are not looking forward to that which is better. I like what Paul says. I don't know which is better. I don't know which is greater. What do I desire more? To be released from this earthly tabernacle, fold my earthly tabernacle, or remain so that I can still be of use to God? And I liked his idea. I liked his attitude. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It does, and I've yeah. 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 Absolutely. What I want more than anything else. There's a lot of folks. There's a lot of folks that have, after years and years, have refused the truth. The one thing I want to be able, the one thing just want to be able to share. It sounds like that song in the hymn book. I just don't want anybody able to say, "You never mentioned him to me. Why didn't you say something to me?" And the words of the song are great. You saw me day by day. You knew I was astray, yet you never mentioned him to me. I can't imagine standing before God, before anybody, and then I don't know that this would even be an opportunity for them to do so. But the idea of somebody coming and saying, "What, we were friends. We were friends, but you never said anything to me about this." Now, to be able to say, "Look, I tried to get you. I tried to involve you on a regular basis. You refused. You didn't want to hear about it." I've had people say, "Look, if you want our friendship to continue, you got to lay off." Well, I'm doing what I can. But for somebody to say, "Look, you never said anything. Why didn't you ever say anything? How could you have called me a friend?" Yes, ma'am. Well, not for eternity. I don't know how. See, this is the thing is, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I don't know how that thing is going to be done. You see the movies where everybody's kind of in a line and they're waiting, and then you get up there and God says, "You go here and you go here." Look, that is mankind's vision about what's going to happen, because we read He's going to separate and He's going to say to those on His right hand, "Go," and on His left hand, He's going to. We don't know how it's actually going to take place, but yeah, to that part, yeah, He will separate us. I remember all those old cartoons. You see the people and they're all standing in line. They're just sort of waiting their turn. They get up there and, God's up there with a pull lever, and the wicked, He pulls the pull lever. I mean, that's mankind's fanciful. They're trying to give a vision to something that we really don't know how that will occur. But we do know that we're going to be separated out. But the idea of somebody saying that, look, can you imagine if it were true? If this were the case, to be standing there and somebody that come rushing up to you and grabbing you by non-existent by shirt cuffs or collar and saying, "Why didn't you say something?" I mean, think about that for a second. That should give us pause for concern. For somebody to say, the thought of somebody, even if it's not true, somebody come up and saying that to you, how devastating that would be to know that I held something that could have saved their soul, but I was either, they'll never listen to me, they're not interested, whatever it might be, and never say anything. Yes. And we just got, but we have to remember that the opportunity that may have been given them, it may be me. I may be that opportunity. Okay, I'm not saying that I'm not saying I'm the only opportunity. I'm saying that I may be an opportunity. And if listen, are they going to learn the truth? Are they going to learn it from somebody who is in error? Or are they going to learn the truth from someone who knows truth? I mean, I'd rather talk to them about the gospel than them talk to their next door neighbor about the gospel. I don't know what their next door neighbor is going to tell them. You know, their next door neighbor may say, "Hey, listen, don't worry about it. As long as you love God, and as long as you claim to be a Christian, and you do the right thing, they never define what the right thing is. Read your Bible. You're fine. Don't worry about it. God is not overly strict or overly picky or whatever it might be." Boy, you know, you might as well not tell them anything. Because then you've lulled them into a false sense of security. They're never going to search for the truth because they think, well, this is all there is. They're not going to look any further, some people. We got to be very careful that we don't say, well, you know, they'll get it from someplace. Maybe us. I may be the one. So, yeah, what? You want to say something? Yeah. It says he woke up in Abraham's bosom. What, you know, place of comfort. Eternal. Yeah. Yeah. And now here's the thing. I do not believe that this is a parable. I don't believe that the rich man and Lazarus is a parable. I believe that Jesus is talking about a genuine occurrence. I do. And I don't want to appeal to authority, but the idea, most biblical scholars look at it and they say this doesn't resemble his parables. Okay, this sounds as if this is a man who knows what's occurring. He knows what's happening. And there are some details to that go back just a little bit of time to the idea of who the rich man might have been and who Lazarus actually was. So I think that he's talking about something that genuinely occurs, because he's talking about specifics. Okay, he's not doing it in generalities. So that tells me that there is a place that would be referred to as Abraham's bosom, a place of comfort, the idea of paradise, not heaven, but a waiting place that is beautiful, that resembles what we're going to have for eternity. And then there's another waiting place on the opposite side that is a place of torment, a place that when you go there, when you wake up there, you know where you're going to spend eternity. Okay, but at the end of the day, we're still going to be separated. How that occurs, I don't know, but I know that it will occur. I do know this. It also tells us that when we get there, we won't be married. Yeah. Yeah. I think we will. I think we will. And again, we're getting into trying to understand something that's really not given for us to understand. Except the whole point behind that was not so we could say, well, how big was the gulf? How far away were we? How hot is it exactly? The whole point is not to get into specifics, but it's to give us some generalities that are important to us. That there is going to be a resurrection. That there will be a waiting place for the good, and there will be a waiting place for the evil. And the good one is in a good place, and the bad one is in a bad place. And it certainly does say that we will recognize one another. But that brings us into another idea I'll get to you. The idea that will we recognize our spouse? I certainly believe so. I do believe so. I believe we will recognize. I do not believe that when we become souls, we lose any kind of identity. That's not the way God is. Okay? I believe our souls are unique to us. I do not believe they have a physical representation, but again, why would we need a physical representation? Why would I need to remember? How would I remember somebody? Would I remember them as a young person? Or would I remember them as they looked when they died? That's irrelevant. We will know one another, however. Okay? Yeah. You were going to say something? Okay. I'm going to leave you this. Okay. Hmm. Hmm. Well, remember, he didn't say he didn't talk to Lazarus. Remember, he said, send Lazarus to me. He didn't say, hey, Lazarus, come and drip. He said, send Lazarus to me. I believe that gives us another little bit of an indication that wherever we are not going to be troubled by these things that are going on. I don't believe that we will. Whether God in his infinite wisdom hides those things from our sight or whatever our comprehension, whatever it might be. But you notice that he didn't cry out to Lazarus, he cried out to God. Because at the end of the day, God was the only one that could do anything about it, and God said, no, you've made your bed, now you're going to lie in it. You know, when you were alive, when Lazarus was alive, he received evil. When you were alive, you dined sumptuously. You had all of the good things. And now Lazarus is going to be rewarded while you and your wickedness are going to pay the penalty. It could be. I hesitate to get too detailed in it because I think that when we do that, what we do is we end up focusing on the wrong thing instead of the big picture. And the big picture is this: there's going to be a place of punishment. There's going to be a place of reward. There's a resurrection. The good are going to be rewarded. The evil are going to be punished. And he said, one of the biggest statement is there's a gulf fixed that he can't go to you and you can't go to him. That tells me that there's that puts the whole idea of purgatory and working your way out of hell. There's absolutely no way of doing that. Punishment is fixed. It's set. Mm-hmm. No, that's the whole point. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I don't know if God hides that from our comprehension. I don't know how he does it. I'm not gonna presume to know that that's how God does it. Well, it's gonna be much better than it is than we could possibly imagine. Okay, I'm gonna conclude with this because we could. This is another topic of conversation that we could go into for a long time. This is from C.S. Lewis, and while I disagree with a great deal of C.S. Lewis's doctrine, I do believe that his philosophy was spot on. I like how he says this is from one of his works called The Weight of Glory. He says, "We are half-hearted creatures, and we fool about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by an offer of a holiday at sea. We are far too easily pleased." I think he's spot on. We'll give up this incredible glory for, like he says, making mud pies in a slum. He says, can you imagine a kid? You go to a kid who's never seen anything better than some squalor, and you offer him an incredible holiday. He doesn't know what it is. He's perfectly fine going making mud pies in the street when you offer him something greater. And he's absolutely correct. We are far too easily pleased. I'd rather have the good things of this earth because I can't comprehend of the greater things that are to come. I think he's spot on. All right. Any questions? Any comments? All right. Next week we'll try something else. How about see if we can't confound ourselves?